Hello and welcome to the pharmaphorum podcast. I'm your host, Jonah Comstock, editor-in-chief at pharmaphorum. I'm joined today by Marc de Garidel, CEO at CinCor Pharma, a company that was just announced as a new acquisition of AstraZeneca. It's not Marc's first time around for selling a successful pharma company to a big pharma. He previously was CEO of Corvidia Therapeutics when it was sold to Novo Nordisk. Welcome to the show, Marc.
Thank you. So welcome too.
So I want to learn a little bit more about CinCor, and we can get into the acquisition in a minute. Tell me about yourself and how you got involved with them, and what's CinCor up to? They have a unique approach to resistant hypertension, and I'd love to hear a little bit about that.
Sure. So, CinCor was actually originated in Cincinnati through an incubator that actually licensed the right of a drug that was initially developed at Roche in Switzerland. The drug was targeting hypertension. As you know, in this field, there's been really little innovation in the last 20 to 30 years. So what was very unique to the Roche approach was that they found there was an important hormone in the body, which is called aldosterone, which is generated out of the adrenal glands. And that hormone, when it is overexpressed in the blood, leads directly to essentially retention of water and salt in the system. And that creates hypertension. What Roche did, the scientists, they found a way to reduce this aldosterone in the blood, and in doing it in a very elegant way so that it will not affect another molecule very close to aldosterone, which is called cortisol, and which is essential for life. So Roche decided in the around 2015 to actually stop the development of various cardiovascular drugs. They wanted to sell everything, couldn't find anyone. And this incubator based in Cincinnati called CRX was able to license it with the help of a venture capital fund, Sofinnova Investments on the West Coast, 5AM, and Sofinnova Partners. So they pull essentially, a team together, initially with actually very few people to start essentially the phase one program, or continue the phase one program. I got personally involved, maybe a year and a half after. So it was in the actually it was in the spring of 2021 when I had sold, Corvidia, and they were looking for a new CEO to take the company, potentially public, to raise a large amount of funds, as this drug would require, large funding for numerous trials. So, obviously I was a natural pick given my experience in cardiovascular. I had run prior to that Ipsen, which is a French-based company, but we did a large expansion in the US, launching a drug that became a blockbuster. So I had, a good CEO experience. I was with Amgen for 15 years before, primarily in Europe, but also in California. So I think I had a good background to continue the journey. And again, what happened is in the spring of 2021, for the first time, we looked at early phase 2 data in resistant hypertension in a blinded fashion. So resistant hypertension is a condition which is viewed by the authorities as patient being on 3 blood pressure drugs and not yet on blood pressure goal. And again, those patients have actually a very high chance of having a stroke, heart attack, or possibly dying. So the FDA and the authorities will really like the idea to have a new treatment possibly coming from CinCor to address a new mechanism of action in an elegant way to potentially reduce further the blood pressure. So that's, when I came in, we saw, basically 40 patient data. This was blinded, but we saw already a nice reduction when the drug was administered orally once a day. That was obviously the encouragement to raise further funds. So that's really the background. And obviously we can comment further on the journey, because it's been a fairly lively journey at CinCor, the ups and downs of biotech. But certainly a very, very attractive program for a large unmet medical need. About 12 to 15 million patients in the US are on 3 drugs and not yet on the blood pressure goal. So it's a large unmet medical need.
Wow. Yeah, that's very interesting. So what stage is your drug in? Is it in late trials or?
We were conducting actually 4 phase 2 trials. 2 of them were concluded essentially last year. Make some more comments about it in a second. 2 are still ongoing, and we met with the FDA, very recently, and basically we are going to, the company probably obviously will be under the hands of AstraZeneca now. Will start a phase 3 trial, later this year. But so basically it is, on the verge of starting, large trial for phase 3, and which is, as you know, the latest stage before potentially filing the drug for approval and getting approved by the FDA and other authorities around the world.
So let's talk a little bit about this acquisition. It was announced a few weeks ago that AstraZeneca would acquire CinCor for more than $1 billion US. How far along are you in that process? Is it a sure thing? And when will you be able to say that CinCor is now a part of AstraZeneca?
There are obviously certain processes when a company wants to buy another. So AZ, we announced it actually the day of JP Morgan, right before the JP Morgan conference, which sort of marks, the beginning of the year for the biotech world. Mm-hmm. What we said is that on January 23rd, AstraZeneca will essentially, in coordination with us, start the standard tender offer. So basically, the possibility to buy the shares from shareholders, from CinCor shareholders. That process takes, essentially, roughly 4 weeks. And in parallel, there is an application that both AstraZeneca and CinCor are making to the FTC. It's called the HSR, so Hart-Scott-Rodino process, where, the FTC investigate that that transaction would not lead to monopoly or situation of concern from a competition perspective. So that takes also roughly 4 weeks, but could be extended. So I think, to summarize, there is a good likelihood, we believe, that the transaction would be completed, by the end of February, but it could be extended maybe another month if the FTC asks more questions and we have to refile. So.
Got it. So how did that come about? How did you begin the relationship with AstraZeneca? Were you approaching other buyers, or who approached who? Tell me the story.
Well, we filed an official document to the SEC just very recently, 14D9, which contained obviously actually much more detail about what happened. But in rough terms, the discussion started to get really serious after we had completed our Series B, which was early in October of 21. So at that time we raised $150 million. So the market had reacted well to the investors to what we were doing, and really the discussion started, I would say, very seriously around December of 2021. They engage into what we call due diligence process. They look at things. They made some proposals. We could not agree, and basically we said goodbye. We will talk later because we cannot find really a way to potentially agree. Then obviously the big event for CinCor was in early August of 22, when we showed that our drug in resistant hypertension, the Brighton study, showed great efficacy. We had 11 millimeter placebo-corrected improvement in patients. Again, these are patients who are really not in great shape. So very, very important efficacy of the drug, and along a good safety profile. So obviously at that time, AstraZeneca look at it and say, this drug looks, really an important improvement to therapy, but obviously subject to further studies. So the conversation, started again and carried on. And, there were some elements that AstraZeneca wanted to see as part of this due diligence process, including what we call a DDI study, so an interaction with some metabolite. And that took a bit longer than planned. And we thought we are going to get close to a transaction when actually, the AstraZeneca said, oh, by the way, you have a second study readout pretty soon, which was in a different population, less severe, called uncontrollable hypertension population. And they said to us, well, why don't we wait? We'll agree on the terms, kind of now, but we wait for the result of that study. And in early December, unfortunately for us, the study didn't pan out positively. So AstraZeneca, asked, to relook at the data and understand why it wouldn't work in this early population versus the more severe population, the resistant hypertension. And they found out that, the study was actually, the drug was not, it was not a problem of the drug, it was an execution issue in the centers where, unfortunately, some of the centers did not administer correctly our drug. And also patients were supposed to at the beginning of the study, supposed to take their background drug in placebo, did not take them and started to take them as part of the study, which resulted in a high placebo effect. So to cut a long story short, the study was really biased. It was negative, but fundamentally the drug was doing what it was supposed to do, lowering blood pressure, but unfortunately couldn't demonstrate it in a statistically speaking. But AstraZeneca, found, agreed with our views, and ultimately, we discussed further an acquisition, and they came up and we agreed to terms which resulted in, as you indicated, $1.3 billion upfront, and then there is about another $500 million payment, contingent value rights, when they essentially register or file, I should say file for registration either in the US or in Europe.
So why AstraZeneca? Why did you end up working with them, and what are you, as you think about them as a partner, as a home for CinCor, why does it feel like they're the right company?
Well, they are a great company because they've been very active in the field of in the cardiorenal field where baxdrostat would be used. They have the ability to conduct this large phase 3. We don't know exactly the size of that phase 3, but we're thinking probably 1,000 patients. They can do it globally. They can do faster and probably better than a smaller organization like CinCor. Just to remind you, we are 20 people, so we are a very tiny little organization, so we would need to ramp up. There was execution risk on that front. So it is clear that a well-established company like AstraZeneca could carry on this study very well. But I think also what probably differentiated AstraZeneca from some of the other big cardiovascular players, they had a specific interest in particular set of the population which has chronic kidney disease. So we call it CKD. These patients tend to are being treated today by more and more by a drug that AstraZeneca has developed. It's Farxiga, so it's an SGLT2 inhibitor, and that drug has proven to be very efficacious in slowing down the progression of CKD. So they thought, however, that the SGLT2s are not very effective at lowering the blood pressure. So combining an SGLT2, their SGLT2 plus our drug, could actually, again, potentially even slow down further the progression of the disease, and could be really could become standard of care in the long term for these patients. So they were very attracted by that value proposition. We were doing a phase 2 CKD study. We see that study is still ongoing, so we don't know yet the full results. But they really liked the work we are doing in that specific population. So I think commercially for AstraZeneca, again, they have with the baxdrostat, they can have two legs. One is the resistant hypertension population, which is again a huge unmet medical need in the US and in the world. And then they have this combination in CKD patients, which would have, they would have to run studies for it. But it could be also, medically speaking, very, very exciting.
So how will this play out for you? What will it mean for the company to be acquired, and logistically, how do you slide into AZ's pipeline? Tell me, kind of as you look ahead to the next year.
Well, again, AstraZeneca will disclose more as time comes, because obviously they will be in charge. So I can't give too much detail, because ultimately they will decide. But I think we are based in Waltham. They have strong operations here in the Boston area. They have as you know, they're building a huge campus in Cambridge, which is almost finished. They have a large Alexion facility in its seaport. So our understanding is through the transition period, they have the ability to transfer some of our staff if they want to, and if there is agreement. So that's, again, part of the transition process. They will have the ability to ensure a good transition with us. But ultimately, they will run the show, and they will run phase 3, and maybe some employees from CinCor will stay. Maybe not. It's up now to AstraZeneca to discuss how they want to transition. But again, that process obviously only can start when we got the final approval from the FTC and we got the tender offer completed.
So, stepping back a little bit, thinking more broadly about the space you guys are in, what happens next with hypertension? I mean, you already said earlier in the interview that this could really, your drug could really change the kind of standard of care around this space. But I mean, is there a pipeline beyond that? Are there plans to sort of refine that, or to look and see if some of these same technologies can be applicable for other spaces or disease areas?
Yeah, I think aldosterone, again, from a medical standpoint, when there is too much aldosterone in the blood, so not only you have hypertension, which we described, but there is a correlation also. What scientists found, this were in preclinical models, they found out that too much aldosterone also is bad for heart cells, and it's bad for kidney cells. And also for liver cells. So there is a possibility, as time goes, to develop the drug for heart failure. There is possibility also to look at some, liver disease-related, inflammatory process. So this drug can really go into, multiple directions. But and this is why we said it's a pipeline in a drug, because there are multiple applications. And this is another reason why a tiny little company like ours, which we already raised about 600 million in the last essentially 12 months. It's still very difficult for a tiny little company to embark on so many possibilities. So in the end, I think, again, a company like AstraZeneca will have to make up its mind beyond, again, resistant hypertension and possibly the CKD population. Maybe they'll develop further in heart failure. Maybe they go into other type of liver disease. So there is this drug is again has multiple application. It is also true that there is some competition coming too, and that's also probably one of the reasons why AstraZeneca wanted to buy us now. Because there are some companies that are behind, but not too far behind, maybe 1 or 2 years behind, and they want to try to catch up as well.
So this acquisition is happening in a time that is pretty rough economically. It's definitely something of an accomplishment in that sense. Why? How do you see kind of the deals like this happening in the current climate, and how did you pull this one off? Without AstraZeneca sort of backing out because of kind of financial pressures, and how do you look at all that?
Yes, no, you are absolutely right that the financial markets have been obviously extremely nervous. The rising interest rate, the risk of recession had a big impact on biotech. On top of that, biotech valuation were probably, when you look back at 2020 and 21, were probably, it was a bit close to a bubble. So there's been a big readjustment. And therefore, it made investors in biotech very, very prudent. But I think, the CinCor story tells you that if you have a good drug, if you have a good development program, and I think a good team, along with good investors, people will support such program. That's why we raised, again, in a very difficult market, $600 million. And I would venture to say that one of the key lever we had with AstraZeneca to do a good transaction was the fact that we had raised so much cash. So we could tell AstraZeneca, hey, you don't the price. Well, we have enough cash to carry on. We can do it. We can do the phase 3. We'd obviously have to recruit, more people, but we have enough cash until 2026. So the fact that we had this cushion of cash, we had more than 500 million of cash in the bank, left us much stronger in the negotiation in that context. So I think one of the lessons is when you can raise cash, when you get good clinical results, you should really raise cash, even though there is obviously dilution for investors. But this is the best way if you want to contemplate at some point an exit. This gives you a big lever in negotiation, and large pharma companies, in general, they want to de-risk, and they like the fact that investors, put a lot of money in the company, because for them, it's another validation that what the company is doing, made sense.
Great. Yeah. And of course, this is a positive payoff for your investors too.
Exactly. Absolutely. It's great. Now, I think, obviously for this year, what's going to be complicated for a number of biotech is that if overall the macro environment does not really improve, a number of biotech will be forced into either, trying to do some partnerships for some of their drugs in the pipeline at probably not very good conditions because they won't have much choice, or they would have focus their cash on the most promising asset, or 3, they would have to merge with each other, or to try to make to rationalize their development program. But this year is going to be unother tough year, I think, for a number of biotechs, until the cycle.
Any other thoughts about kind of more broadly industry trends that you're seeing in R&D and in pharma, looking towards this year that's just beginning?
Well, there's tons of innovation out there. So again, recently there's been some very interesting results for NASH, which is a very also serious disease, where there's been very little, drugs out there for patients. So I would say this is an area of great interest. There are multiple. There's a lot of work, obviously, on cell therapy, as you know, on gene therapy, rare disease. I think we're going to continue to see some really good, good stuff, for patients being developed. But again, the law of of selection is going to continue, and if you have bad news, if you have bad clinical news, it's going to get tough for these companies. So it's more and more a market, I think, that's starts to stretch itself into really the winners and the losers. More and
more consolidation. Yeah,
more consolidation. Yeah, and I think the early stage companies, all the platform companies, we'll have to accelerate development, also to make choices in terms of which where do they place their bets, because they are not going to be able to be to finance all their programs on their platforms, and they may have to again out-license part of it to big pharma so that they get some cash to get going. So I think also there is obviously another source of financing, non-dilutive, which has been more more usable more recently, is this sort of a royalty type of financing, where you basically get a lump sum of cash from a third party, and that is against future milestones and royalties on the drug. So that tends to be done probably again for products that are more advanced in development. Usually, it's at least in phase 2 or in phase 3s. But if you have, for example, a long phase 3 program and you don't have enough cash to go until the end, which could be the situation of some companies, then that's probably one of the ways that elegant way to raise cash and without dilution for the investors and give a chance to see the result of the phase 3.
So, last question. As a person who's overseen 2 successful biotech exits, what advice do you have for folks who are running small pharma companies who are looking to pull off an exit? And I'm sure anything would be helpful.
Well, I think companies are bought, not sold. So what you need to do is you actually shouldn't think about selling. You should develop your company as a standalone. You should do what's important for the patient. You should develop it to understand how your drug is going to be differentiated versus anything else. And not only for pure registration purposes, but also for reimbursement, because the world of reimbursement is going to get tougher and tougher as time goes. So that's my advice: is do the right thing. Don't worry about getting bought at some point. It will come if you do good things, good program, good drug, good results. At some point the big guys will show up, and then it's up to you and the board, obviously, to decide whether they want to sell or not. But don't start your journey with the idea, I want to sell, because that's bound to I think honestly for failure, because you're going to do some shortcuts. You're going to be extremely short-term oriented, and you're not going to develop the drug in a way that big pharma would want you to develop it.
Great. Well, thank you so much, Marc. It's been great chatting with you.
Thank you so much.
That concludes this episode of the pharmaphorum podcast. You can find more information about this episode, including a download link and information about other installments in the series, at pharmaphorum.com/podcast. The pharmaphorum podcast is also available on iTunes, Spotify, Acast, Stitcher, and Podme, where you can find and subscribe by searching for pharmaphorum. And don't forget to visit our website, where you can sign up for daily news and analysis bulletins, and to follow us on Twitter at pharmaphorum. Thanks for listening.